Hey everyone, welcome back. Today's story is about power, pride, and one decision that changed everything. Stick with me, because this might just change the way you think about leadership. A vast and prosperous kingdom, surrounded by golden fields and towering mountains, there ruled a king named Alexander Rowan. He was not just known for his wealth or military strength, but for something far rarer, his ability to listen. But that wasn't always the case. Years before becoming the respected ruler he was, King Alexander was proud, stubborn, and believed that a king's word was absolute. He trusted no one completely, not even his ministers. His royal court was filled with brilliant minds, strategists, economists, generals, and philosophers. Yet their voices often faded into silence, because the king believed he already knew everything. And that was where the problem began. The kingdom starts to crack. At first, everything seemed fine. The kingdom was rich, trade was flourishing, and the people respected their king. But slowly, unseen cracks began to form. The farmers started struggling due to poor irrigation policies. The army grew restless because of unclear commands. The treasury began to shrink because of bad trade deals. Each time, the ministers tried to speak. "Your Majesty," said Minister Caleb, the wisest among them, "we need to reconsider the irrigation plan." But the king waved him off. "I have already decided," the king said sharply. "A king must act, not hesitate." And so the wrong decisions continued. The ministers grew silent, not because they had nothing to say, but because they were no longer heard. A storm arrives. One year, a severe drought hit the kingdom. Crops failed, rivers dried, food became scarce. Panic spread among the people. The ministers gathered urgently. "Your Majesty," said Minister Elena, "we must open the emergency reserves and import grain from neighboring lands." But the king refused. "We cannot show weakness," he declared. "We will endure." Weeks passed. The situation worsened. The people began to lose faith in their king. For the first time, Alexander Rowan felt something he had never felt before: fear. The old minister's challenge. One evening, as the king sat alone in his chamber, Minister Caleb entered quietly. "Your Majesty," he said, "may I speak freely?" The king, exhausted and troubled, nodded. Caleb looked directly into the king's eyes and said something bold. "A king who does not listen is not leading. He is ruling alone. And a man who rules alone will eventually fall alone." The room fell silent. No one had ever spoken to the king like that before. At first, anger rose within Alexander, but then something changed. For the first time, he didn't interrupt. He listened. The turning point. Caleb continued, "Your Majesty, leadership is not about having all the answers. It is about having the courage to hear them." Those words hit the king deeply. That night, Alexander could not sleep. He thought about the farmers, the soldiers, the empty granaries, the silent ministers. And for the first time, he questioned himself. What if I have been wrong? The next morning, something extraordinary happened. The king called for a full council meeting. The first step toward change. The ministers entered the grand hall, unsure of what to expect. King Alexander stood before them, not with pride, but with humility. "Today," he said, "I will not speak first. Today, I will listen." The ministers exchanged surprised glances. One by one, they began to speak. They shared ideas, solutions, concerns, strategies, and for the first time the king didn't interrupt. Deeply. By the end of the meeting, a new plan was formed. Open emergency food reserves, trade with neighboring kingdoms, build new irrigation systems, support farmers with resources. It was a plan built not by one man, but by many minds. The power of listening. Within months, the kingdom began to recover. Food supplies stabilized. Farmers returned to their fields. The people regained hope. And something even more powerful happened. The bond between the king and his ministers grew stronger. Alexander Rowan was changing. He began holding regular council meetings. He encouraged debate. He asked questions. He no longer saw his ministers as subordinates, but as partners. And the kingdom flourished like never before. A test of leadership. Years later, a neighboring kingdom threatened war. The generals urged immediate attack, but the ministers advised caution. In the past, the king would have chosen quickly, but now, He paused. He listened. After careful discussion, they chose a different path: diplomacy. A peace agreement was formed, saving thousands of lives. The people celebrated not just the victory, but the wisdom behind it. The king's legacy. As the years passed, King Alexander became known as the king who listened. His story spread across lands, not because he was perfect, but because he changed. He learned that true strength is not in control, but in understanding. Before his death, he gathered his ministers one last time. "My greatest victory," he said, "was not in battle, but in learning to listen." If this story inspired you even a little, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Because sometimes, the strongest people aren't the ones who speak the loudest, but the ones who listen the deepest.